Here's our third video for the week, and we're going to look at the story of water in the wilderness from a different source. So here now from Numbers 20, verses 1 through 13. The Israelites, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and against Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Would that we had died with our kindred died before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into the wilderness for us, and our livestock to die here? Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to bring us into this wretched place? It is no place for grain, or for figs, or for vines, or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Then Moses and Aaron went away from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting. They fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, and command the rock before their eyes to yield its water. Thus you shall bring water out of the rock for them. Thus you shall provide drink for the congregation and for their livestock." So Moses took the staff from before the Lord, as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock?" Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me to show my holiness before the eyes of the Israelites, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and by which he showed his holiness." So, two different versions of this story. Are these different? Are they the same? What do we have here? Did you notice there's a whole lot more detail? For instance, we hadn't heard a lot about Miriam in a while.
No.
And we learned that that's where she died. And also in the Exodus passage, we don't hear about Aaron, but as we know, Aaron is by Moses' side the whole time, because when Moses first wanted to say no to God, he said, "I don't have the gift of speech. I can't do this." So God reminded him that he had his brother Aaron that could help him out. That could be a spokesperson. And really, every time we read Moses, we need to read Moses and Aaron. Their details. We hear more about details about how the people complained, why they complained. But I also think we also hear how Moses and Aaron would go to God for answers, even when the people complained. The detail of their time of worship, of putting themselves before God in order to get answers. I like reading more detail. I like hearing more of the story. But the people are also going further back in their grumbling. They're going, "Why did I have to leave slavery? Why did I have to go away from there? Why do I now have to worry about how I feed my people and my livestock?" Their questions are more detailed. Moses and Aaron's answers are more detailed, and we hear more from God.
Yeah, and here's what's kind of interesting. And, we don't really know if this is just a different version of the same story, or if this is the people came back to this place and things happened similarly. What's interesting here, though, is that God judges Moses. God says that Moses, not Israel, but Moses, lacks trust. God says, "You won't make it to the promised land because of what you've done here." Now, what you've done here, that's a tough question. What is it that Moses has done here that was wrong? God doesn't really specify. One of the things that we do notice is that God says, "Command the rock to give forth water." And Moses strikes it twice, as a matter of fact.
Not once, but twice.
Not once, but twice. if this is actually a separate instance from what has gone before, if this actually did happen twice, what does that say? It says, well, Moses came to the rock and said, well, this worked before. Last time I struck the rock, that's got to be what happens here. If it's just kind of a different version of the same story, Moses, we know that Moses was frustrated with the people's quarreling. They're grumbling, and that frustration just boils over. And he says to them, listen, you rebels, watch what I'm going to do. Whack, whack.
Yeah, he's got some thoughts about these people at this point.
The water flows, but it's not what God wanted. I think in either case, it kind of comes down to, Moses didn't listen. Moses didn't listen. I mean, Moses got the gist of what God was saying. Go to the rock. But he didn't hear command the rock to give water. Maybe he heard, I know what to do when I get to the rock. I've done this before. Or maybe there in that moment that he thought he was so frustrated with these people that he thought commanding the rock meant physically commanding. That's probably not good leadership. Moses couldn't bang on the people, so he banged on the rock.
Yeah, I also wonder if in this moment, maybe it's almost like he needed to put on a little bit more of a show for the people, again, in an effort to try to answer their grumbling.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's not magic. The staff is not a wand.
Although that would be really cool.
It would be interesting.
But it's not.
But it's
not.
not.
It's not what we're reading.
It's not that we don't want to give glory to the staff. We don't want to give glory to Moses. We don't want to make this a place that that becomes a relic. We don't want to make this a place where things can be manipulated. Instead, it's God who does this. It's God who makes that move. Moses says to those people, say, listen, you rebels. Moses needed to listen. We hope that this is a season, that this is a time that allows you to slow down and listen. That's the point of taking something away. That's the point of the fasting during this time, or that's the point of taking something on, of spending concerted time listening to what God has to say. It takes careful listening. It takes consideration. It takes really kind of the same questions. Is God here? What is it that God is trying to say? What is it that God really wants from us? Rather than running forward and assuming that we know what God means. Take that time today. Take that time in prayer not to speak so much, but to listen, to be silent before God, to hear what God has to say. Thank you.
See you next week.